We are quite happy with another sterling performance, building good momentum towards next year's election. What is also gratifying is the cooperation and the compliance rate for voters in relation to the anti-COVID measures that we have had to implement at the voting stations. The voters are coming to the stations with masks. They are sanitizing upon entry and exit at the station. They're bringing pens, although not all of them. But so that's gratifying.
Yeah.
You've made reference to voter turnout during yesterday's by-election. It's not a phenomenon that only obtains this year. It's a historical phenomenon, certainly since 2000, when the current system of local government was instituted. And also, it is not even. So there's an even turnout through the different wards in the country. What appears to influence a voter turnout is the nature of the political dynamics in the world. Where there are controversies and those types of things, there seem to be higher rates of participation. Whereas where it's just calm and there aren't issues and so on, obviously then people don't participate as much as we want them to participate.
So you're saying it actually would work in favor of voter turnout to have some controversy in the run-up to any election?
I'm saying our experience is that where controversies of a political nature obtain, it tends to spur a greater participation.
Yeah.
But also the types of candidates that are selected by political parties, there are those that have a natural pull for greater participation than others. That's a normal human phenomenon.
Yeah. Yeah, and if we think about voter turnout and the issue that you've just spoken to, I suppose the US elections from this November is a good example of how those voter trends sort of are the same around the world. If we look at the most contested election probably in the US in recent history, that proves the voter turnout theory that you have there. But Sai, just in terms of lessons learned during the past two now local government municipal elections that we've had in the country, how does that prepare us for 2021? I mean, it's seen pretty much as a dress rehearsal of what's to come next year.
Certainly some insights that we need to take into 2021. The most obvious, of course, is that we are likely to have a general election within the COVID context. Therefore, the application of measures is going to be important. The provision of an appropriate level of PPE for staff. We have to make adjustments to the management of the queues because obviously this was a by-election. A general election would have a higher rate of participation and the speed at which we process people in the voting station would have to improve. And so on. So those are some of the insights we're taking. The use of table and tents by political parties outside the boundary of a voting station and maintaining social distance at that level. It's something that we are working with parties on because we don't want people to be infected at those tables.
Yeah.
They serve their own political purpose. We accept that. But they have to be managed in a manner that is consistent with the measures that government has introduced.
I mean, depending on where we are next year when the local government elections do get underway, it's not unreasonable to think that, a lot of that might be done away with. Depending on the level of infections that we have at that stage, it might actually not be safe to have people sort of outside of voting stations, even if there are political parties that are canvassing for their own parties. It might not be a safe thing. Only those who absolutely need to be there may well be allowed to be there.
No, oh, certainly, certainly, it's not a far-fetched proposition. In fact, we're in discussion with the National Party Liaison Committee on jettisoning the use of those in some of the areas that have, show a high preponderance of infections. So it's a matter that will remain on the table, and we will watch it as we increase the momentum towards 2021 elections.
In terms of the budget for these elections, do you see the money being used very, very different given the things that need to be put in place in terms of COVID protocols?
Indeed. I indicated earlier that we are likely to have this general election within the COVID context, and therefore our logistical supplies have increased. We now need to add a myriad of items related to the prevention of transmission of the virus, which we had not budgeted for, but they have to be provided. We can't take a risk and have an election which then become a super spread of the virus.
Does this mean you get more of a budget, you ask for an increase in your budget, or does it just mean you're taking money from other areas?
No, we are unlikely to, rather, let's put it this way, at this stage, there is no indication that we will be receiving additional budget. So we've got to finance all those things from jettisoning certain projects or scaling them down.
Yeah. So just in terms of these elections being a dry run for next year, in terms of how COVID-19 may impact voter turnout. A low voter turnout is never an ideal situation in any democracy. So what are the things that your organization has sort of come to terms with in terms of, you know, if I am positive with COVID-19 and it is a local government election next year, or it is indeed a general election, should that be a deterrent for me voting? Or is there a way that I can do so safely? I mean, we do special votes every year. Is that what might be put in place in terms of COVID positive people?
Let's start here, Michelle. When you are infected, you don't lose your political right to vote. I think that's a very important point to make. And if you are asymptomatic, you can even visit the voting station, because the measures that are implemented at the voting station in their cumulative nature are such that they will avoid transmission, even if a person was infected.
Right.
Because you wear a mask, you sanitize, you use your own pen, and so on. So the possibility for transmission within the context of the voting station is significantly minimized. But secondly, a person who's significantly symptomatic, such a person will be availed an opportunity to cast a special vote in the normal course.
And Sai, of course, this means that the people who are involved in ensuring these special votes go ahead, I mean, if they are visiting people in hospital, for example, people who are still able to vote but are indeed in hospital, those people from the IEC will also need that additional training.
They'll get additional training. Our training manuals have been adjusted to account for the transition, but also the type of PPE offered to those people, it's a higher level PPE than it is for those that are at the voting station, because your PPE must be context specific and appropriate to the circumstances of whether it's a hospital, it's a home, and those types of things.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Sai, thanks very much for coming on to the AM report and giving us a sense of elections during a pandemic. Sai Mamabolo is the IEC's Chief Electoral Officer, and of course he's talking to us in the wake of that second by-election that went off apparently without a hitch just yesterday.